Hi, I'm Peggy Pringle, Associate Vice President for Practice Management Services at the Texas Medical Association. And we're here today to talk about ICD-10 with Steve Arter, who's CEO of Complete Practice Resources. Steve is also an author and an educator. And also Denny Flint, who's President of Complete Practice Resources and a former CEO. Okay, let's talk about training. That's one question I get a lot. What about training for physicians and staff? What kind of commitment are we looking at for the practice?
It's a significant commitment. In fact, the RAND Corporation, which is a government think tank used by a lot of corporations, estimated that training was your second biggest ticket item behind IT and your practice management software and EHR, second most costly expense for ICD-10. So again, training, we've got this gift of time, this delay, we've got time to train. But as far as a time commitment, we need to talk about role-based training. We're strong believers in role-based training. Not everyone needs all the ICD-10 education.
That's a good point.
It really is, and you know that's why it can be so overwhelming for a practice. How am I going to train everybody to do everything? But you don't have to with role-based training. For example, the physicians, what do they need? Absolutely, they need familiarity and awareness of the documentation elements they need to capture in order to be able to choose a specific code. So we're looking at maybe 8 to 10 hours for documentation training for the docs. For our coders, it's going to be a significant more amount of training, a lot more training, because they've got to learn a whole new code set. And don't forget, our coders, as well as our software, have to maintain proficiency in both ICD-9 and ICD-10. You know, we've got a lot of payers like work comp and auto insurance that aren't subject to HIPAA. So they're going to have to, they don't have to go ICD-10. So our coders, our billers are going to have to maintain proficiency in both 9 and 10. So we're not talking about just stopping training completely on ICD-9, even though we're not going to support it anymore. They're going to have both. But as far as the question you asked, a commitment for training, 40 to 60 hours is what we're looking at for our coders. Additionally, again, we've got this gift of time with the delay. It's very important that coders especially update their knowledge about anatomy and physiology. You know, we got a lot of comments in the Texas Medical Association workshops we did. Some of the docs were saying, I haven't used these terms since med school.
Yes.
Well, imagine what your coders are going to go through. So during the training commitment, we're strong believers in getting your coders and your billers some anatomy and physiology training. Virtually everyone in your practice that's impacted by diagnosis is going to need some ICD-10 training, even if it's just to recognize the structural differences. For example, pre-authorizers of insurance, people who do any order entry. So everybody's going to need some amount of training because ICD-10 is so sweeping.
Steve, you have anything to add?
Yeah, you always have to look at the business aspects of this, and as we've said, preparation is the key. Planning and preparation is the key. There will be a huge difference between the practice that plans well and stages their training over a 1-year period of time, as opposed to the practice that waits until 3 months prior to the implementation and tries to get everybody trained at once. That practice will literally have to take their business offline to get everybody up to speed and all their processes changed and everybody trained in the new processes at the last minute. And if you need a consultant's help, forget it. The price will be off the charts and the availability will be very limited in the few months just prior to the implementation of ICD-10. Everyone will be scrambling. If you've prepared well, if you've assessed, if you've created an implementation plan and you've staged it over an extended period of time, it will flow and you'll be ready and you'll move into it, and training will not be nearly the negative impact on your business that it will be if you do it at the last minute.
So planning is key.
Planning and preparation is key. That's why we constantly tell people, start now.
And another thing to consider, and I know you get this question all the time too, how much can I expect to spend on training?
Right, that is another
The amount of
question.
training you give your practice is completely dependent on the amount of budget you dedicate towards that training. So some practices, they'll throw their coders an ICD-10 book. Some practices will bring folks like us in to train on site. So how you train is completely, wholly dependent on the budget you dedicate for that training.
There's an aspect of training also that people quite frequently overlook that I think is going to be critical. We have such tremendous software capabilities available to us today. You will have to train your software vendor how you want your software to work for you in ICD-10. This will be one of the most critical aspects of ICD-10 training. In the recent series of seminars that I just led, we were looking at how a particular EHR vendor presented codes and looked at documentation. Well, it was very clear from looking at it in depth that the documentation elements needed to select the codes were in a component of the software that did not generate the codes. So the doctors were totally reliant upon the EMR vendor to provide them the codes that they needed, yet the way the EMR was structured, it could not provide them the codes within the software. They had to actually go back and look. So the efficiencies of the EHR were completely lost because of the design of the EHR. So you're going to have to understand what you need, when you need it, how you need it, and you're going to have to communicate to your vendors about this and train them to do it the way you need it to be done.
Those are good points. Thank you.
You're welcome.